Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. So, we're going to start with how does psychology develop as a science? We used to go to the village elder. It could be a wise woman, could be a wise man, could be an ancient philosopher. They had wonderful advice, the closest thing we could get to science, but it was not scientific. And then in the Middle Ages, again, we would have quests and adventures and philosophers, but once again, not the scientific method. And nowadays, of course, we've got entertaining pop psychologists. They're all over the television and social media. It's very entertaining, but again, we don't call that science in terms of the scientific method. We're going to be learning about these two skeptics. Penn and Teller, they're a group of comedians who are also great skeptics. They debunk a lot of things that are so-called science. And the amazing Randy, or James Randi, is also great at debunking claims that people have. So you're going to see them throughout the year. So, how can we develop psychology more into a science? Well, we know that psychology is the scientific study of mental processes and behaviors and how these are affected by our internal processes and the environment. Part of what we need for the scientific method is critical thinking. That means we need to make objective judgments. It has to be well supported. We need to use reason and we need to use evidence. So, I like a good conspiracy theory just like the next person, but that is not critical thinking and that is not science. So, we can't use our emotional side of ourself or our beliefs just because we think it is and myths and so forth. We have to use well supported, peer reviewed evidence and well supported reason. So, three elements to critical thinking: we need to have curiosity, wondering why or how something happened, skepticism, meaning we don't already prejudge or pre assume that we already know the answer. We're a little bit skeptical. How'd that happen? And did that really happen because of what I did? And we need humility. Humility meaning that we do not know everything at all times. And we say the rat is always right because in scientific experiments with animals, if the rat does something in terms of a behavior, the rat is always right. So here's some elements of critical thinking. You want to be curious and have skepticism. You want to keep an open mind. We need to tolerate a certain amount of uncertainty. Like we just lived through COVID, right? And there was a lot of uncertainty from day to day. We have to learn to tolerate a certain amount of uncertainty in the scientific realm. We have to question assumptions and biases, including our own biases. We need to evaluate all the evidence that's available, all of it, even if it disagrees with our theories. We need to consider alternate interpretations beyond just what we thought. We need to avoid being overly attached or overly emotional about our results. We need to not jump to conclusions. We need to let the data speak for itself. And sometimes we have to reassess the conclusion. If we get new information, we often have to go back to the drawing board and reassess. So, five key critical thinking questions. What am I being asked to believe or accept? What evidence will support this position? Are there other ways this evidence could be interpreted? What other evidence would I need to evaluate these alternatives? What are the most reasonable conclusions? So, overconfidence. We tend to think we know more than we do. When we are convinced that we're correct, we miss all the other evidence. We miss the real evidence. We don't wait for the findings. But our intuition is often wrong. We're going to learn about something called heuristics later on this year. And when we use our intuition or heuristics, it's a shortcut often, and we're often wrong. And we also call this confirmation bias, where we only look for the answers that prove us correct. So being overly confident about the data is not waiting for the data to show itself. So what if TV detectives jump to the wrong conclusion? They often do. It means our TV shows would be done by the first commercial break, right? Or TV doctors like Dr. House or Grey's Anatomy. If they jump to conclusions right away in the first 5 minutes of the show, they're usually wrong. and the show would be very short. So it takes them the entire show to actually get to the right answer. And they only get there by following all the evidence. And that's what we need to do. We need to not be overconfident like we sometimes see on TV. We need to follow the evidence all the way to the end, and only then can we actually get to the right conclusion. So again, skepticism, we need to doubt until proven correct or proven incorrect, and we need to let the data speak for itself. So we're going to learn to think like a detective, not like a know-it-all. So know-it-alls start out saying, yeah, 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 I know, I know, I know. Nope, a detective is looking for clues and looking for evidence along the way as you experiment. An example of overconfidence, 81% of new business owners in America, well, they think their businesses are going to be a great success. But if you ask them about all the other businesses that are opening up, they think, oh, they're going to fail, 39%. So we're all a little overconfident, and yet that's a 40%, almost a 40% failure rate, but 81% of those thought they were going to be really successful, right? So we just tend to have overconfidence about our own abilities. Hindsight bias is the I knew it all along phenomenon, the tendency to believe after the outcome. This is important. It's after the outcome that you knew it all along. So looking backwards after it's already happened, then it's so obvious. It's like, oh, of course, I knew that answer on the test. Of course, I should have studied that section. Oh, of course, I knew that teacher was going to ask me a question on that. So it's always looking back afterwards that you see it so obvious, so clear. So if you've ever used these three phrases, oh, I knew that would happen. Oh, it had to happen. Or I said that would happen. And the big one that's not up here, I told you so. I told you so. Have you ever said that to your friends or said that to your family? Then you have experienced hindsight bias. Like, I told you Friday would be pizza day at the cafeteria. I knew it. I knew it all along. So, in real life, some real life examples. Why does this matter? Hindsight bias. Well, these are some disasters that are here on your screen. BP Oil, they had a Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion in 2010. Chernobyl had a nuclear meltdown in the 1980s during the Cold War. There have been many, many times in history, probably within the current year, that we could find examples where something could have been prevented, but only in hindsight bias. So the employees were taking shortcuts. There were warning signs that were ignored. Every indicator was there to say this is going to happen, but we didn't see it going forward. We only saw it backwards, right? 2020 hindsight, where you go, oh, that was completely obvious. Of course it was destined to happen. It was bound to happen. So hindsight bias is the price we have to pay for the fact that we have hindsight at all, which is generally a good thing. And being able to look back and connect the dots between things that have happened, it will help us make better decisions and learn from our mistakes. So that's all of part one, but now you're going to watch part two as we continue on our journey.